Welcome to the Healthy Home Show. I'm your host, Fernanda Furman, Healthy Home Architect.
Hi, I'm Eric Furman, Healthy Home Contractor.
And today we're here with
Caroline Blazovsky.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Yes, thank you, guys. Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here. You're doing a great job, and getting everybody educated is wonderful. So wonderful. Kudos.
Thanks. Yeah, and you're such a big part of this whole show that we're doing, because mold, which we're going to be talking a lot about, is a huge hot button and hot topic today. So yeah, thank you so much. Your wisdom and expertise is very needed. So I'm going to jump right into your bio, and then we can start talking about all of these things. So Caroline is a national healthy home expert with over 20 years of experience working with the public and physicians to create healthy living spaces and improve wellness. Her certifications and education include knowledge of wellness, indoor air quality, mold, toxins in the home, green building, healthy homes, and allergies. Caroline's been featured as a leading home and safety expert in the AARP, Shape Magazine, Martha Stewart, Reader's Digest, Doctor's Radios, Dr. Radio, Homes on Homes, House Smarts TV, The Jenny McCarthy Show, and is a regular guest on Sirius XM Radio. She also appears on podcasts, YouTube, and resides on the Public Education Committee for the Indoor Air Quality Association, and also board member of and credentialed IAQ, Indoor Air Quality Professionals. Caroline is the CEO of My Healthy Home, a green building company that offers testing services, products, and consultations for homes throughout the U.S., and she loves making people healthier. So you're in the perfect place.
It is. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, so one of the things that we love to hear from all the speakers, it's because everything, for us and for a lot of the speakers, there was that, tipping point that triggered everybody to start looking in their homes in a different angle or searching for different solutions. How was that for you? What happened to you, or how did you get into this business of healthy homes?
I was working in New York, in Manhattan. I was in the communications marketing business, so I was in a different field, and I was young, very young. So it was 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. And I developed allergies, and I went to a physician and they said, take a pill. And I said, well, that's so weird. Why do you have to take a pill? And I had just an inquisitive nature. I mean, I really did. And I started questioning it at a very young age, which is strange because most people start questioning it much later in life. But fortunately I did in my 20s. And I said, I'm not going to take this pill. And then I started looking in our environment, and I thought that there was mold there. And then we investigated that. And sure enough, and this is a long time ago, and people, they said mold can't make you sick. And then as soon as the mold was gone, I improved and things went away. And so I just got into it that way and just went back to school and started learning and getting degrees and anything I could at the time. There wasn't a lot back in the 90s, really, as far as certifications. So I got in committees. I actually started a lot of certifications and work with boards to get certifications made. So it's really interesting. The process has been quite a long one. So.
Yeah. So you actually kind of changed careers, so to speak, and you ended up getting into the mold and remediation type of business. Is that correct?
Yeah. And back then, that's originally what they had. I mean, now as an indoor air quality professional, I do all kinds of different testing, and it just keeps growing because homes are just a plethora of problems. But back then, mold was, mold and allergens were the first thing that I started to get involved with. And I got my first certification was as a mold remediator, and I was out in the field taking samples and working on jobs. And so it was very archaic compared to what we see now. But yeah, it was amazing, actually.
So the biggest thing that's going to come up for the listeners and even ourselves, I mean, testing, right? And this is a big hurdle right now, and a point of confusion for a lot of people is, I'm going to throw out some acronyms here, the ERMI test, ERMI, or the air pump sample with this cartridge, or I should be doing XYZ. So can you help us and the listeners clear up where we're at with testing right now, what you're recommending and what you're offering and what you've seen? I mean, it's a big one, but really help us clear up, okay, I think we've got mold. How do we test for it?
That's right. So, years of experience, and I was just having this conversation with somebody, cannot replace a test. So the first and foremost is to find a consultant, mold remediator that you trust. okay, whose experience, knowledge, there's a lot of groups out there. I'm part of the ACAC.org, which is a great organization. A lot of them have similar credentialing to what I have. You want to find a good resource, okay? And you have to trust in that person that they understand mold, because I can tell you that a test may say something, but my experience sometimes overrides that because I know better, or I've seen experience a situation where it's, you know, the test may say it's negative, but I'm still suspecting something. And that comes with, I've seen 30,000 houses in my career, which is a lot. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing. You've got to have someone with experience, someone you trust, someone who has a good reputation in the business, comes from a good certification program like the ACAC.org. Then you've got to do some baseline testing in your home. My opinion is I've always gone to air samples, the ERMI test, and then there's other tests like the Hurts Me Too, and then also even the mycotoxin tests that do what we call DNA sampling. The difference between an air sample and a DNA test is that an air sample is actually looking at an actual spore. And to me, that's an active spore. That's something that's viable, living, can fly around, can land on things, and we can find spores in anything. That doesn't mean you have a mold problem. I mean, if I go out and test any surface, I can find a mold spore. It doesn't mean it's a viable colonizing problem. It just means that there's a spore there. Simple, right? With the other tests, they're using DNA or PCR analysis. And so what they do is they sort of find pieces of mold around, and then they combine these together and they make a mold spore, and they call it a spore, but really it's sort of pieces of mold. And the difference with that is that when you're looking at tests like the ERMI or the Hurts Me Too, or even the mycotoxin analysis with the environmental tests that they also offer at like real-time labs and places like that, all of these can have importance, but how you put them together is the key. And so when I'm looking at DNA, it kind of gives me a history of what's going on. You could have tracked something in from outside. It doesn't necessarily mean you have a problem. I had a client, for example, who came to me. They had a log cabin, and I like to give examples because every house is so different. They're just like us. They're just like people, right? They have a whole history. A house has a whole different plethora of problems, like you do versus me versus somebody else. You have to look at it as its individual place. So I had this really interesting case where it was a log cabin, and they got the Hurts Me test back, and they said, and the ERMI, and they said, look, we've got tons of mold, but we really don't think it's in here, but they keep saying it is. And what had happened was they had blasted the outside of the log cabin with a wrong medium. They had used something that was harsher than they should have. And when they did, they blasted it into the interior, but they didn't have an interior problem. It was an exterior problem, right? So they were supposed to use peanut shell. You probably know more about it as a contractor when you have to blast the sealant off the outside of the log cabin. They blasted it into the air. And so of course the test came back positive on the inside for DNA particles because they were there, but it wasn't an internal problem. So that's what you have to really look at on these tests. So I use an air sample first and foremost, and that gives me sort of a baseline analysis. So now I'll let you talk because I've been talking for a whole bunch of minutes, but that's my first, my first one is always an air sample, and it's multiple on each level. I like to see what's going on in the basement, the first floor, the second floor, depending on what kind of structure you have. I don't test typically for an air sample. I won't do an attic space because that's open to the outside. So I want to make sure each level, and then I'll do multiple samples depending on the size and the budget of the client.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned something that's very important. And I think for the audience we have said it, I think a couple of times in other interviews, is that when you have an experience. So even if the test says there's nothing in here, based on your experience, you know that there's something else that we need to look into. And what we've seen when we had our mold in our house is that companies will send, people that they hired 2 weeks ago that they trained, they send those people to your home, and we were quoted, our remediation was going to cost $80,000. So we were in that situation where we're like, we don't have that money to,
that's right,
starting out, right? And I see that as a problem for many of the people that they live with mold like we did, because we can't afford to treat the mold and not knowing what's going to happen next. That's 3 months out of my house, and you're dealing with people that sometimes they will treat just the surface, but they're not actually fixing the issue. It could be a plumbing issue that it's, in our case, was a sprinkler that was, heating water little by little for years.
Right. So what I like to do is, and this is why I developed the test kits that we have, was to make it economical so anybody could test. That was always my goal. I didn't want to see people, I saw it in the industry all the time. Well, I can't afford to do remediation. I just need some information. So an air sample to me is really, really effective. In a small percentage of cases, you'll have mold that's hidden behind walls and things like that, that doesn't necessarily show a spore, right? So for example, if you had something within the walls, maybe the spore isn't actually able to get out, but the mycotoxin is, or the volatile organic. Molds do three things. So let's just back up a second. They produce a spore, which is, or a protein, has protein in it, and also a beta glucan, which causes inflammation in the body. Molds also produce a VOC, which is a volatile organic compound. Similar to smoking cigarettes, they sit in your house and they puff away and they put off a volatile organic, just like paint does. And then thirdly, some molds, if they have the ability, produce a mycotoxin. And what I find interesting about molds is they're really cool, actually. They're so smart and they're colonizers. So if you go and disturb their colony, they'll signal to the other ones in the group and say, produce a mycotoxin. So when you do a cleanup, you want to make sure that you clean up everything and you don't start piecemealing it. So it's really bad to like dig around in it and then leave it alone, because it says, hey, you disturbed me, now I'm going to punish you and throw out a bunch of mycotoxin. So they're very smart and they've been around since the beginning of time. And the thing is, from looking at all the houses that I looked at, I don't like to see people go on a wild goose chase. I can find mold anywhere. And as a contractor, your husband knows this probably better than anybody. Mold exists as soon as you bring water sources in, bathrooms, kitchens, you get sweating, you get condensation, you'll start to get mold growth like very soon after installing bathroom. But that doesn't make it toxic. That doesn't mean that's going to make you sick. What's going to make you sick is if you don't do general maintenance on houses. So I say 20 years, my rule of thumb for a bathroom and a kitchen. If it's over 20 years old, you need to do a remodel. And that's just to make sure that everything is, you know, up to date, that you don't have all this condensation happening under your toilet and behind your showers. It's going to happen regardless. So you just have to stay on top of it and do the due diligence in houses. Unfortunately, houses are not expense free. They're so expensive to maintain, but if you don't do the maintenance, you're really going to have problems. And that's where we see the issues come up. So.
Yeah, I think you brought up two excellent points I'd just like to hit on right there is the maintenance or lack of therefore. You brought up another interesting thing about 20 years in the bathroom, and that's where we've seen things as well in our own home and our customers is, yeah, it's these hidden areas that maybe not even so hidden that had you been doing some maintenance or looking into it, like for example, under a vanity, under a sink inside of a bathroom, you know, you've got towels and all these things shoved up against there and you can't really see water dripping with all of these things under your sink or these areas that you could probably see. And then the other one is that, correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is what people need to understand is mold is natural. It's everywhere. The minute you even do, let's say, a complete perfect remediation, you open the doors and the windows, mold's coming back in. It's part of nature. So it's our job really to compress the growth of that by not having these uncontrolled moisture sources in your house.
That's right. And we are going to have them because we have brought water in. We want to shower. We want to have hot tubs. We want to have saunas. We want to have, you know, bidets. We love all these things. So we're going to bring them in. But the key thing that I think I've learned over the years is that controlling relative humidity in the house, and this is where our business has gone, is really developing state-of-the-art dehumidification systems, making sure that you're keeping that relative humidity between 30 and 50% in the home. You know, you can go a little lower, not much higher, but a little lower. And you want to make sure that you're keeping it very dry. And so that helps to inhibit mold growth. So molds are just like people. They need food, they need air, and they need water. So my idea is let's cut off the sources as much as we can and not make it a warm and fuzzy place that they want to hang out. You know, so we're going to make it a little more challenging for them to exist. And that goes, humidity goes with bugs. So you don't have to use pesticide as much. You know, all these things, dust mites feed on relative humidity as well. So in order to have a healthy home, the simplest, I mean, it's so simple. You go out to the hardware store, you pick up a hygrometer, you put it in, I have one in each level of the house, and you monitor your humidity. And by keeping that down, you're going to remove the dust mites, you're going to keep the bugs down and the mold. It's so inexpensive, simple, but we don't do it. So it's key to, you know, really, really just make that, if I had to say any change that's just so easily done, that's the one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, humidity is such a huge aspect. You know, it's interesting as we started looking into the mold remediation business, exploring ways to solve our own problem. I met a gentleman that does a lot of work in all places talking about humidity. He said the largest area that he's working in is Las Vegas, which was shocking for me. I was like, okay, this is the lowest humidity I've seen in the whole country. So why are these people having these problems? And then we go back to the building is in an effort to conserve energy while their air conditioning is running 24 hours a day in the summer. They've closed up the house and they're actually getting mold from humidity buildup inside of the house in Las Vegas.
That's right. And, to touch on it too, when you live in these warmer climates, Las Vegas, Southern California, Texas, Florida, you've got to be servicing your HVAC. I can't say this enough to people. HVAC, when you're running air conditioning in the Northeast where I am, we run air conditioning half the year, roughly. So you get it serviced at least once. But when you run it 3/4 of the year or even all the way, the full year, you've got to be servicing that at least 2 to 3 times. That's cleaning the drip pan, making sure you don't have mold growth in the HVAC system. Those are areas where you're going to get substantial mold growth, and making sure the ducts are cleaned out, that you don't have any mold growth in the ducts. That we went to a lot of flex duct systems versus the real metal ductwork, galvanized metal. So now it loves to form in there. You get a little bit of dust, you get a lot of moisture, and then all of a sudden you've got moldy ducts. So it's really important that everybody services. And I know they don't want to, they want to save money, but that's these are keys that are very inexpensive fixes to save you from the big problem later down the line.
Absolutely.
And then it touches again on what you just said a while ago about hiring the right people, right? The right person that knows. Because when Eric was helping a client, they had the mold remediation done. But when he went and saw all the air conditioners, the same thing you're saying, there was mold in the attic. There was mold inside of the air conditioner ducts. So it would still come back. They fixed the walls and the envelope, but they didn't look at other areas. And I think that's where your knowledge is so valuable, because when you're in the house, you look at the house as a whole, not as a one spot that has that black mold, which one of the guys that came here in the house, what he does when he sees mold? He paints with oil base over it. He's like, oh my gosh, he paints with oil base and it hides everything.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, okay, you're creating another issue. Actually, multiple
issue. So, and that takes us to another point, right? So when I look at houses, though mold is important and people get very worked up about it, honestly, when I go into homes and see a sick person, there's a lot more going on in a home than just mold. And if people always say to me, oh, well, if you had to pick a home to live in, would you live in new construction or would you live in a moldy house? What do you think my answer is? I'd live in a moldy house that didn't have chemicals and pesticide. And people can't understand that. They go, oh my God, mold is bad. It can be carcinogenic. It can produce a neurotoxin. I'm not minimizing that at all. But when you combine that with new building construction, high volatile organics, high formaldehyde, a lot of the carcinogenic materials that come off building products, you can make a really big souped mess that, trashes somebody's immune system, makes them have all kinds of issues. And it's that combination. And I call it the trifecta. So when I go into a home where I see a sick person, I typically see 3 or more things that are massively wrong in that environment. So not just mold.
That was me. That is exactly what happened to us. When we remodeled the house, I was working from home, and I see that it's a big issue right now because there's a movement. A lot of us are working from home now. We're seeking to leave our 9-to-5 jobs, especially moms, working from home. And we don't understand that we're being bombarded by all those, a little bit of doses every day from everywhere. And when we remodel the house, we put dual panel windows with new painting, new flooring, glue down, engineered wood, formaldehyde. We installed the air conditioner. And I'm like, it was summertime. I'm pregnant, 7 months pregnant, which makes I'm already dealing with hormone changes. And I became so ill. It was insane. So it was all that combination that no doctors could help me. They didn't know. They thought I was faking, that I was seeking for attention, that, even one doctor wanted to report me to the DMV because I was having brain fog and I couldn't remember what my house looked like. I had to look on Zillow to remember my house.
And it's so frustrating, when someone I mean, from the clients I've had for these many years, nobody wants to be sick. Nobody wants to end up in a doctor. And it's so upsetting that even as a caring person that you would tell that story and the person's just like minimizing it. And I think because they don't have the answers or they don't understand, they try to put it into a box. That's, I don't think I want to assume the best in people and that they don't want to do something that, they're just trying to take what they applied in med school and, fit you into a certain area. And unfortunately, when you do have issues in your home, it doesn't necessarily always correlate to blood tests or urine tests or scans. You can have all these symptoms and not feel well, but be relatively healthy. And I kind of correlate it to putting you in snow. It's like if I took you, Fernanda, and I put you in a bunch of snow and said, okay, run. I want you to run 3 miles. And then I took all your clothes off and I said, keep running, and you're freezing. Your body works fine. It's just that I'm loading you down with all this stuff and you can't go. So what I try to do with a house is alleviate those stressors and then hope that the body will heal, the person will heal, and then their symptoms improve. And that's what happens. I mean, it really does. It's not and it also, if you do have a chronic condition that maybe isn't going to get better just from your home alone, it definitely takes the pressure off and people's symptoms improve. They may not solve the problem, but you're not going to be overloaded with VOCs. Like VOCs are a big one when we talk about volatile organics. When we remove them from an environment, people do, that brain fog like goes away and they feel better. It's just because they're overloaded.
Yeah. It's so interesting how these common themes keep coming up, and it's exactly what we've heard. This is so great. So for people thinking they may have mold, that they can't see the mold, what are some of the common symptoms that people are telling you that they have, that like when they get these tests, as you mentioned, it's not showing anything or it comes up normal? Like if they have mold, and obviously there's other things going on, but just mold, for example, what are the symptoms people are saying? I've got this, this, and this, for example, to know that they probably have a mold problem.
When I'm doing investigations, I always listen to the person. That's my first thing, because believe it or not, there are patterns with these things where I see certain symptoms occurring over and over again, and then other symptoms. So like, for example, brain fog is a big one. When I see a lot of people who have paint cans, people love to store paint in the house. And you know this, like once you crack a paint can, that can is open. It's outgassing. So you're continuing to breathe in wet paint. And I see clients, I have pictures of 50, 60 cans of paint. They're storing these in their basement or in the garage, and everything is connected. And you laugh because this is probably your hubby there. They are, your house is built under negative pressure. So you're pulling all of that in, you're breathing it in. You feel stoned every day. You don't know why. It's because you're breathing in fresh paint. Mm-hmm. So getting rid of the paint cans is huge. I can't even tell you how many phone calls I take and people say, I need to put a consult with you. And I say, I just listened to their story for like 5 minutes. I'm like, look, call me back. I said, if it gets bad, take your paint cans out. And they go, how do you know I have paint cans? I said, because most people do. I said, take them out. If you don't feel better, give me a call and then we'll do testing. And you don't know how many people just go, oh my God, my kids are going back to school because I had, 15 paint cans in the garage underneath their bedroom. So it's crazy, but yeah. So anyway, we got off topic, but
no, actually, we loved it. I'm so glad you brought that up. Okay. This is what's so great about this. This is real. This is real stuff, people. Okay. So first of all, just biggest takeaway here. We're not here to freak you guys out. It's about bringing awareness. And you just brought something up that I totally forgot about. So we watched your other interview with Dr. Pompa, and you talked about the paint cans. And while I'm watching that, we were looking at each other like, oh my gosh, never thought about that. So in California, our tract homes, which we live in, a lot of homes, the garage is part of the home, and it's right underneath the office, and probably within arm's reach of where we're storing, I would say maybe not 50, but 25 paint cans. And one of the buckets, half empty, half full, of the glue from the glue down floor, and another brand new bucket of glue for the floor. So it's all sitting within arm's reach of the office because it's right below. And wow. Yeah. We haven't done that yet. So we'll be calling you. We'll be one of those people. Hey, we can do something better. It's the last piece of the puzzle.
Don't store construction products in the house either. You've got to get, I live the way I preach to people. So I've got a storage facility, everything goes there, it's heated and cooled storage facility. So anything I need, because I like to do projects too, just like you do, but you can't do it in the house. And especially, I think women, because we do bear children and because of our hormone system, I definitely think we have a sensitivity that men just don't have, and a lower threshold. So, and plus she was pregnant too, but
And I was
It's so
painting the
bad.
house. There are pictures of me painting the house with the big belly because I'm a very good finisher. Like my lines are straight lines you would not believe. That was before I was wearing glasses, but my lines were super straight. So I love doing that, right? And so there are pictures of me with 7-month pregnant belly painting the house. I wish I
But
knew
that's what you get,
then.
that nesting instinct. You needed the net to nest, so you decided you were going to
Yeah.
toxify yourself in the
I
process.
wish I knew then what I know now, but at the same time, I feel like going through all of the things we have gone through, even like hurting our, our relationship and everything, it made us understand that people are going through this right now. And I see a lot of the people that are emailing us, they're saying that how their partners don't understand
Yes.
what's going on with them and they don't feel the validation and how it's hurting their relationship. So I think going through everything, it brought us this purpose right now that we really want to express the importance of the partners being involved on the process of at least, learning more, getting educated on that.
Yes. And I think anyone who's a consultant, you become sort of a counselor, I mean, you have to talk with the husband and the wife and they don't agree. And it's just becomes kind of part of the job. I've had to do that so many times. And, someone will say, well, I'm an engineer, I'm a contractor, I'm an architect. Why do you know this? And I don't know this. And, I can paint and I'm not hurting anyone in the family. And then that's why I'm very science-based. So, and I look at numbers and I'm always about actual testing and numbers and seeing what's there and proving what's there and tying things together. And not everybody's like that, but I am very science oriented. So when I take the samples, what I like, especially with volatile organics, I can say, look, you're using bacterial wipes, you're drinking wine in the house, you have mothballs, you have paint, and I break it down and I can show them and people are blown out of the water. They're like, how do you know all this? How do you know that this is in the house? And it's all the chemical compounds and how they correlate to different products we use. So you get a big CSI investigation on people's homes. So I'll know you really well. Like if I just ran a sample on you, I could tell you're storing paint. Maybe you like to use a lot of bacterial wipes or you're using a lot of essential oils. Anything you bring into your house produces a VOC. And so I like people to understand that it's not just about green. Just because something's green doesn't mean it's healthy. Turpentine comes from pinene, is not healthy for you. So eucalyptus, lavender, citrus, all of these things are in the volatile organic, they're all VOCs. So they add to that bucket. And so what I like to do is see you at a certain number of VOCs per liter, and then I keep you within that range. So you can have some natural things, some unhealthy things, but as long as you're staying within a balanced level and you're not too high, then I'm okay with it. But just remember, natural things add up to that too. D-limonene is a big one that people overuse in the wipes. It's the citrus smell. That doesn't mean it's good for you. It's natural, but it has its own side effects.
Yeah, I once again agree with you. And we keep hearing these same things over and over again. Thank you so much. This is eye-opening for a lot of people. So just to kind of touch on what you just said, this whole movement towards green and clean. We actually had a great speaker on, Andrew Pace. He talks about the degree of green, and he brings up things that you're mentioning right now is just because it says low VOC or no VOC and all these standards that were created, like EPA, for example, it's to protect the environment, not necessarily us within our homes. Sure. So that's where people like you and these events where we're talking about this stuff, we can start to bring these things up. Like, look, you may need to look a little outside the box and not just go, oh, okay, this is great, I'm going to buy that.
Get an army test, get the results, and then settle with that, because there's could be much more even. And I would love for you to actually give us your thoughts on shower heads, because we have heard that shower heads can actually store a lot of mold.
Yes, they can. And also Legionella, which is a big concern. So just go back to his question 1 second. I just want to name off some things in a house that can go wrong that can make you sick. So, because I think everybody focused, right? So we could have a mold issue. Maybe we could have a mycotoxin issue on top of that. We could have dander. We could have skin cells, which we all shed dander and proteins. So basically, we always blame pets and say pets cause dander problems, but we shed too. So we've got skin cell, which is a big problem. A lot of people don't know how to clean. You don't clean properly. You're not using enough HEPA filtration. You're not wiping surfaces. And this builds up and it becomes like a powder. So it's kind of puffing powder in your face all the time, creating a whole systemic inflammation response, which not only includes proteins, but then particulate. We have particulate problems. We have animal protein. We have radon. We have lead. We have semi-volatiles, which are all the products you hear about, like the PFOAs and the waterproofing materials and all of the endocrine disruptors, right? Those are your semi-volatiles. What else? Formaldehydes, all the aldehyde families. So when you think that you don't feel well, there is way more to it than just mold. Okay. So I want people to understand, sometimes when you do get a mold test and it comes back fine, it really is fine. And, you know, you can do a double check. You can either do a mycotoxin DNA test to kind of just make sure your mycotoxins are, you know, not present at a high level. You can also do an MVOC when you do your volatile organic test. So when we run our VOCs to look at your chemicals, we can run what's called an MVOC. We can look and see, are there any volatiles from molds that are getting into your environment that are above the normal level? So that would be if you had something in a wall and you couldn't see it, maybe find a fireplace behind in the bathroom. So you can always do a double check. But typically in those cases, when I do a spore analysis and then I do an MVOC, it's a very rare one that there was a problem there that we didn't see. Most of the time it's accurate. And that's why we created, you know, the Examinaire, which I have next to me here. But to give you an overall assessment, we do in that test particulate, we look a really detailed particulate analysis, dander counts, spore, toxic molds. So it gives you a really good assessment for $400. And I think it really puts you on the right path. And then if you really are sick and there's other things that don't come back in this, you could start, you know, spending a little more money to investigate it.
Mm-hmm. And how often like, for me, I want to do, like, as part of our maintenance for our house, I was telling Eric, every year I want to do a test just to make sure we are within range, there's nothing growing. How often do you recommend?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. So I tell my clients, treat it like it's your body, you know, the doctor, one test a year. So you need to do a water test. Everyone needs to be testing water. Unfortunately, what you get at your location is not what you get when it leaves the plant. Some people have wells, some people have city water. That needs to be tested for sure. And then, like we talked about the filters, we can talk about some really great filters that they have for showers. So you need to know your chlorination byproduct, what level of chlorine you're exposed to, because not everybody, depending on how close you are to the plant, factors, the plumbing, what comes in contact with the chlorine as far as, you know, just debris and other things that's in the plumbing, that affects your chlorination byproduct. That was the number one, or one of the lists when they made a list of cancer causing agents in 2009 that went to the president of the United States. Chlorination byproduct was on there, and chlorine. So it's real important for people to test their water, know what you have. But yeah, so one test a year. And then when you do a mold test or an overall assessment, like, so this was, I just have it here, but I'll show it to you. So this is our Examinaire test. And so this test I would recommend doing like every 3 years, just to give you an idea as to what's going on overall, everything. So that's going to say your dander counts, how well you're cleaning, your dust mites, your pollen outside. It takes an outside sample, an inside sample, so you know what your outside environment's doing. And to me, that's why I created it, because I wanted everybody to have this baseline and a really good assessment for not much money. And I think we've accomplished that, which I'm happy about.
Mm-hmm. Great. And so, wow, you brought up two things. One, I know I keep asking about mold, but yeah, you brought up something. No, this is really important that we need to understand that it's not probably just mold. Maybe even if you have a mold problem, or if you don't, there's so many other things going on. For example, a quick story of us is one of the things that was affecting me when I finally got on board and said, oh, there's something wrong with our house, is we had closed it up so much that the level of CO2 in our house, which is also now considered an indoor air pollutant, the level of CO2 was 5 times higher inside of our house than it was outside. So we didn't have fresh air in our home anymore.
That's right.
And then the other one is, years ago, we started with the water. That was a big thing for us, and that solved a portion of the problem. So yeah, we're actually now a water filtration manufacturing company. So that was obviously a big huge chunk of the pie, but it wasn't enough. And so, like you mentioned, there's all these things that could be happening, and maybe even all synergistically together.
And a story on the water, since you're, we're talking about that. I was not a believer. I just saw dollar signs, getting out of our account every time he bought a system and tested. when he installed, my first son was born in a house that had a whole house water filtration system installed. And then we moved to the new house. And before we had a chance to install, my son developed a very bad case of eczema. We took him to the doctor and he's like, oh yeah, just apply the steroids twice a day on his whole body. He's a boy,
Right.
a year and a half old.
Oh, that's right.
So as soon as the water filtration was installed, the symptoms disappeared. He never had a flare up again.
Yeah, and also you have to understand there's standards within every state for water, and just because they allow you to have a certain percentage of arsenic in the water, arsenic's a carcinogen. You don't want it, but you're allowed to have so much according to the government, and that doesn't mean it's okay for you. I did a house recently up in northern New Jersey, and it was for a doctor. He wanted me to check his water, and he was worried about the PFOAs and the PFOS, which is the basically they used it in manufacturing. DuPont, there was a big DuPont company there, and it used it a lot with waterproofing materials, and then you could use it in Teflon and different products manufacturing. And so sure enough, his test came back and he had it, and it was below the national, the standard. So you're allowed to have it in the water, but when it's something like that, you don't want any of it. So then you have to get a filtration system. So filtration is really important. I don't recommend it for anyone. It's the same philosophy I have with purifiers. I want to know what we're treating. I do not just treat arbitrarily. That is not how I work. I don't believe in just going and getting a HEPA filter and sticking it in the corner. And there's
Absolutely.
reasons. There's reasons for this. People do not change the filters. If you're allergic to cat, for example, and you capture all the cat protein in your filter, that protein is still there. It's open to the environment. You're still exposed to it. You're still going to have cat allergies. That is not a closed seal system. And so you don't want to use filtration unless you're using it properly, that you know what you're filtering. You don't always need it. We've got to test it to find out what exactly you have, and then I'll implement it. So if I think you need it. But I like to source correct way before I'm going to put a filtration in, just to handle, something that shouldn't be there to begin with. Now with HEPA filtration, I really recommend over the age of 65, if you have genetic mutations, or if you have genetic genes for like the APOE4 gene for Alzheimer's, the BRCA gene. There have been studies. I went to the University of Southern California at the Keck School of Medicine, and one of the first few things we learned was how much environment and particulate exposure. That particulate comes from pollution. So, and other things too, but mainly in city areas, we see it. It affects those genes, and it makes those genes. So like if you have the APOE4 gene, you're going to produce amyloid plaque a lot faster in an area where you're surrounded by particulate. So heavy city, urban areas, you've got to be using HEPA filtration. Over the age of 65, we know it improves cardiovascular function significantly in the elderly. So if you have an older parent, somebody who really needs, starting to get older, give them HEPA filtration. You can put it on the HVAC system, or you can do portable units, but you got to be changing it regularly if you're going to do that.
Yeah, you bring up another really good point, and we're in the same boat. I think there's this mentality when you start talking about these things, such as the air, the water, mold, VOCs, is that our consumer mentality is, I'm going to go buy this thing, like you mentioned, and put that in the corner or add it to my HVAC system, whatever, and that's going to solve all of my problems. And you've just said, which we firmly believe in, we've seen ourselves, it's not. It depends on the person, obviously their age, what they're going through, what's actually happening in the house. So would you say, if you're feeling symptoms, or even if you just want to be proactive, the first thing is to get an accurate, realistic test, or a person, if you're having really big problems, to come check it out at the same time and get the testing done to see what's really happening in your home.
That's it, 100%. And I like people say, oh, I don't have a lot of money. I'm fine with people going to a local hardware store and picking up a radon 2-canister test and doing a radon test. Perfectly fine. Great test. No issues. I don't even really care so much about whether you do an ERMI test or you do an air sample. I mean, there's right ways to do it, but if you can only afford something, I'd rather you do something to get some baseline than do nothing at all. Absolutely. So look, I got in this business for education. I'm a big advocate as far as, testing homes, indoor air quality, healthy homes. It's not about the money. And I think that's why people don't understand. Like, I want to fix the problems. I don't want to create more problems. And I know that selling a purifier isn't going to fix the issue. So why would I do that? Now, it depends what the issue is. Then we can help alleviate some of it. But let's do source removal first, hands down.
Yeah, totally. And I think everybody has this mentality too that like one size fits all, because we all got into this point where we are all buying the same things, and then you'll see, you know, an advertise on TV, oh, this is great, or you go to somebody's house, oh, they're using this, and they go by brand. And what we see is that there is a need, like even for, you know, for the air, for the water, for mold, there is a need to test for certain things and find out what's important to you. Like for us, fluoride, it's a number one. We need to get rid of fluoride and chlorine and all that stuff. Some people don't care about fluoride. So it's all goes towards what your priorities are, what you can afford at this moment, and what can you plan for. And I think planning is huge, because even if you can't afford something right now, if you know it's there and you need it, you can always plan for it.
Right. Or a bathroom remodel, kitchen remodel. Those are things that, you know, sometimes people come to me and they're like, you know, I've got, like you said, fluoride in the water. Okay. But your kitchen is 50 years old and you've got like degrading pipes and mold and moisture. I mean, what's more important to fix at that time? To me, it's definitely, you got to do a kitchen overhaul. So you better start saving your money for that. And that's why when I do mold testing, it gives me a big picture, right? I say, okay, do we have to do this right now, or can we wait? All right, you have a little mold, maybe you have an 8 count in the basement. I'll say, that's not really my priority right now. Let's see what else is going on. And then we can always circle back to that. So that's why it comes down to the consultant. It comes down to having people who have a lot of experience and have an overall, I mean, look, my background is very diverse. I've started as a mold remediator. I'm a home investigator, a home inspector. I went back to school for architecture, which most people didn't. I didn't have to do these things. It's just, I had a passion for it. So I have a sustainable design graduate degree, a certificate for sustainable design. So I learned all about building envelopes and LEED and all of that good stuff. Then I went back to med school at the Keck School of Medicine because I wanted to learn about public health, and I wanted to get, so like, I'm like a weirdo. I don't expect people to be like me, but because I did that, and I think your husband's the same way, you have to look at this house as a big picture. It's, if you start looking at it just like this, you're going to be missing so much. So it's the whole, it's the same way we should do medicine, right? Look at the whole body. And then we fix what's really wrong and hope that the body will correct itself, and it'll adapt. You know, once you start removing these big offenders in your home, your body's going to say, hey, thanks. You can do one little thing at a time. You don't have to do the whole house. Everybody's like, I have to spend $200,000. Like, no, start. Your body's going to appreciate even the little gestures that you make and just taking the burden off it. And you'd be surprised what happens. It's really cool.
So true. For us, when we start learning about all this stuff, we're like, oh my gosh, we're gonna have to throw away everything we have and buy everything new. And then Eric brought fresh air, like something so simple. We reduced we changed our cleaning products. We changed a lot of things in the house. Like I don't wear a lot of, you know, like I don't put a lot of things on my skin, but I got rid of the ones I had, and I got something more natural, using coconut oil, or, you know, reducing whatever I can, and just bringing fresh air. Did
you go, Eric, did you do an energy recovery ventilator? What did you do? Had you bring any ventilation in, or what did you do for your house?
Yeah, so for the customers out there, there are 2 of those, the heat recovery or the energy recovery ventilator. You're going to hear this come up a lot, this acronym ERV or HRV. So here where we are in sunny Southern California, I did an experiment. Well, everything's been an experiment, but we don't need one. And it's a very low shock to the system when we're bringing in, even in the middle of the night, we get into the 40s or whatever. We don't need the air to be tempered as it comes back in. And I also have it on, it's a long story, but yeah, the biggest takeaway was, so I got to back up here. No, we don't have one. No, we don't need one, but it is filtered from the outside, and it's on an automated damper depending on the level of CO2. And we're not getting a shock or a blast of cold air or hot in the summer coming in. And then, so much to talk about on that. The reason why I brought fresh air in through the HVAC system is because of a couple of things. Is one, we were trying to save electricity at the time, but we have, like, for example, like just opening the window didn't make sense because of barking dogs and a neighbor that I think is deaf with an earshot that has the TV and falls asleep with the TV on like level 100. And I'm one of these guys, especially now having kids, like any noise, like boom, I'm up, you know? So it was an annoyance for me. I mean, the dual pane windows are amazing. It's like closing off this vault and I can't hear anything. We can't even hear the police outside of our home.
So, you put yourself in a coffin though. You suffocated yourself. That's what happened.
We did.
Yeah.
So the introduction of fresh air into the home was huge for us. Like you mentioned, is like, what are these small things you could do? Even though it wasn't a small thing,
right?
On the grand scheme of things, it made a huge difference. So we're not using an HRV or an ERV. Now, as you know, in other parts of the world, like where you guys are at in the East Coast, anybody maybe a really hot climate, you're going to need a variation of that. Yeah, it would definitely reduce drastically the efficiency of your unit, and you would.
And so people know that, because they don't have a lot of people watching this don't have the details like that.
Yes.
That we know. We use a lot of these, when you say dampering systems, we use a lot of these now. They're very effective. We use them with, so when Eric's talking about the house not breathing, a lot of the products that we're building with now, we used to build with plywood and real wood materials. And so we went to a lot of this oriented strand board, fiberboard product, and it does not allow moisture to flow out. So Eric first it wasn't flowing air, so he fixed one problem, right? So he's allowing air to come in now using a damper. In his case, he can just have a fresh air intake and damper it in and out because he's got access to it. Some people live in a city and that creates a whole other issue because you've got no fresh air intake, but whatever. He's got a fresh air intake coming in with a damper. But now he's still going to have moisture in there because that isn't going to help get rid of when they shower, when we get some humidity. Unfortunately, California is changing just like other places. This climate change has really affected us with buildings tremendously. Mold growth, everything proliferates faster. We know the moisture is out of control, and people think, oh, we're getting hotter as a planet. That's not actually what's happening. We're raising temperature, but we're getting, because we're melting, I think, ice caps, this is my philosophy, we're getting a lot more humidity in general. So I think we're going to actually eventually live in like a planet like Dagobah, like in Star Wars, where it was very damp and swampy. That's what I think is going to happen to us. That's just my opinion. But all this humidity now, what do we do with it? So now that's trapped in there, and that's where the mold piece comes in. So now we're doing dampering systems again, where we're allowing air conditioning to run when we need it. When the air conditioning turns off, we damper, and then we allow the relative humidity machine to kick on, or your dehumidifier, and that'll take the moisture out. Because naturally, when you run air conditioning, you reduce your relative humidity in the house. But in certain areas, like your part of the country, other places where it's cooler, the air conditioning isn't kicking on, or the building's so energy efficient, it's staying cool. But the way relative humidity works is that the lower the temperature, the more relative humidity. So people often think hot, humid. That's not how it works. The colder spot in your house is going to have the most moisture. So you have to kind of think about that. And it's very complicated. It's not probably just for this conversation, but that's why basements are always more moist, because the temperature is lower. And so when we don't turn the air conditioning on and it stays cool, we still have this humidity we have to get rid of in the homes. If that's
absolutely, you could bring up a great point. And there's a whole other conversation, relative humidity and dew point and these things, especially during remediation. But for simplicity for people, and then to bring up another real life scenario that happened to us is once we realized we had a mold problem, and we were living in the house and trying to figure out what we were going to do. We ran a dehumidifier basically 24 hours a day. And there's two versions of it. You can do a whole house dehumidifier, which we hadn't done. So we found a portable one that had a pump that I basically drilled a hole through the wall so it could eject all the moisture it was collecting. And like you said, we were trying to keep it in that safe range of 30 to 50. I was obviously keeping it below 50. And something else that was really interesting is whole house fans are becoming very popular, and they actually solve a lot of problems. But to tie this back into not creating more problems is 10 months of the year, when we're 5 miles from the beach, we used to live in an arid climate here in San Diego, but 10 months out of the year, we are 60 during the day, 60% humidity outside, to in the evening when the coastal fog runs in. I mean, 90, 100% humidity. So the last thing you want to do is open all your doors and windows, run the whole house fan all night long, and you wake up to a cold, damp swamp in your house.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. It's amazing, right? I mean, there's so much to this. And that's why when people are looking to get assessments, you have to understand there's a whole building science, one that goes behind it. And then we're all working this out, you and myself and all the other people that are working this industry currently. We're trying to figure out what really works and how we can do it, right? Because, I mean, the way we're building now, as far as I'm concerned in this country, never considering a healthy home, we're putting in the cheapest materials. We're trying to basically make every dollar we can. I mean, I've got issues with PEX plumbing. I've got issues with the fiberboard. I got issues with the Tyvek. I'm an old school builder. So when I look at things, if I'm building a house, I'm building it with real plywood. I'm building with asphalt tar paper. I want a breathable surface. I'm building with wood, brick, or stone. I'm not going with vinyl siding, which just seals that building envelope in. If I wrap you up in plastic, can you breathe? Nope. If I wrap you up in wood, can you breathe? Yes. So I'm an old time, I still have not seen anything in my experience that is better than that old time building. And I understand the energy efficiency. I understand why we want to do these things. But when we reduce the amount that the HVAC comes on and we save energy, look what happens. Now we've got moisture problems and we've got ventilation issues. So now we're compensating, we're saving energy here, but we're increasing our energy consumption and mechanical ventilation here. So to me, it's just we're just playing a game of swap. It's sort of how we did with Volta organic paint, right? We went from high VOC paint that hits you in the face to now we have low VOC paint that lasts so much longer. I mean, you paint your house, I can tell you paint it up to 18 months after you paint it, sometimes 2 years. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, one of the things that I see a lot too is like a lot of resistance. I don't know about you, but when I try to talk to contractors and I was helping a client with a small remodel, and I trying to talk to the contractor about some of the issues that I've seen, and they're just like, you know what? Basically all of them. We have been building like this for hundreds of years. That's how we build, and nobody gets, that's just a fad. Mm-hmm. And the other thing too that I see is that the owners, they will trust the contractor because it's hard to find a trustful contractor. They don't want to be, burn that bridge with the contractor.
Right. And it's hard to get people to come follow up as it is to get a job done, right? Anybody who's done house projects, getting everybody, your electrician, your plumber, your contractor, your GC, whoever's coming, to get everybody there is hard. But you've got to be vigilant.
And that goes back to planning. Like, you get the right consultant that from the beginning, if you're building a house or remodeling, then the contractor, when he comes in, he must know. And that's just like one of the things that I've seen missing in the industry is this communication between the owner, the architect, the contractor, the designer, the electrician, everybody that's involved on the project, to understand that the main goal is to help the homeowner creating that house that they were planning for. Right. Either, whatever it's in their mind, that's what we're there for. But there's a lot of, I think now this conversation is being brought up more often. And this is one of the goals that we have for the show, is to have architects and designers and students right now that are going to architecture school to understand the implications, so we can have more people advocating for healthier homes, healthier buildings and materials, because now we do have options, right?
Yeah. No, and that's education is huge. If you get a product, always look at your MSDS sheet, your material safety data sheet. What's in this product? I mean, these are available to you from all the companies. So you always want to look at that. And if you're not sure what that means, you call a home expert, a consultant, a healthy home expert, an indoor air quality professional, someone to say, hey, what are these chemicals? Is this okay to put in my home? That's the first thing. The other thing is, going back to the architecture question, I can't even tell you, when I was doing sustainable design, I got into it so many times with my professors, and I think they welcomed it, because a lot of these LEED standards, I didn't agree with the products they were recommending at all. I was like, you're going to put this in, it's recycled. Where does this come from? Why is it recycled? And where are we getting it from? So I'm real particular about my drywall. I don't want formaldehyde in it. I don't want, adhesives and glues. What I recommend to people for, my spackle and things like that. I recommend like a product called Merco 100, which is a great hyperallergenic spackling system. I do the old paper spackle, you know, I'm not using any of the mesh the polyester meshing that has PVC on it. You know what I'm talking about, the mesh for the drywall application.
Yeah.
You know, so I recommend a lot of people like granite, but I actually don't really prefer it because you've got to treat it all the time. So you're going to have to put a chemical on it. So I actually like things like Cambria, the quartz products. I think they make some really great stuff. You don't have to worry about radiation exposure. Not that that's so common, but you know, anytime you bring stone in, it's an issue.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of great things you can build. Fantastic. And you just have to really be conscious about, you know, if you're buying something like engineered lumber or you're buying something like Pergo, what's in that? What is exposed, you know, what are you exposed to? And definitely get a piece of it and bring it home and do a sniff test on it and just put it in your house and see, like, does this smell? Because once you put that in, you're stuck with it. And people are like, oh my God, I put Pergo in and now I'm sick as a dog because I've got high formaldehyde. And, you know, I try to tell them, stick with, especially if you're sensitive, stick with simple product, go with real wood, you know, go with a UV treated real wood floor with a, you know, you can do one that's already pre-done, which is great. So you don't have to do all the staining and stuff. But if you stain water-based products, and try to give people just a little, you know, little clues on how to build more healthy, but you can do it. It's not hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can do it. It's not hard. It's a great closing statement there. I'm putting myself in the customer's shoes or the listener's shoes. Excuse me, I'm thinking business right now. The people listening to this, I mean, I'm just like, boom, 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 boom. Oh my gosh, this overwhelm could happen. And as we go through this, kind of the takeaway that I'm getting from a lot of this, and it's hard too because me being a perfectionist, is this mental shift that I've been having to have. And it's a great tip, hopefully, to kind of take this to heart, is with a home, whether it's existing or new construction, is you're going to have to take the perfectionism out of it and know that you did your best and then just kind of move on, because it's never going to be perfect. And then even if you do get it perfect, you could have a leak from water.
The next day, I've seen that happen to so many people. They're like, I just did my bathroom and the leak, it's blowing a leak. I mean, it does happen. But let me say, you can have a beautiful home. You can have it the way you want it. You can actually do things economical. You have to just start understanding your product. And that's an education piece that I put back on you, the listener. So you have to be the one to start taking, you know, when you're at night and you're relaxing, maybe instead of picking up a book, you know, you want to do a project, pick some products, look at the MSDS sheets. You've got to do your due diligence. No one is going to do that for you. Not me, not Eric, not Fernanda. You have to actually take that into your own hands and start really realizing that it's my job to kind of know what's in my home, and I'm going to educate myself. And that's the most important takeaway, I think, from everything. Nobody is going to do that for you. You know, we can present you with information, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to do some research yourself and educate yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I guess there's so much to talk about.
Yeah. I know, we can talk forever.
What about the shower head?
Oh, so there's a company I like in Oregon a lot, and it's called ProPure. I think it's propure.com.
Mm-hmm.
I have their shower heads. Now I have a well, so I have a different situation. I don't have chlorination, and I won't. That's why I have a well. But you put it on your shower. It's great. It's got great pressure because I'm all about, I have to feel clean. So I like a pressure system. I don't like a filter that slows up my pressure.
Yeah.
And it can basically, their whole system, they make the pitcher system. You can go out to the brook and actually sanitize your water down to use rainwater or something, or brook water. And they've got amazing filtration on there, takes everything out. So they have pitchers, they have the shower head, and they have, I think, a whole house system, but I think it's propure.com, and they're excellent. I mean, their products I love.
Mm-hmm. So have you seen mold in the shower heads, regular?
Mold, I don't see so much, but I see a lot of calcium buildup and biofilm, and that can lead to Legionella, which is very important to clean your shower heads and also your sink, you know, where you have the sprayer on the sink. Mm-hmm. Alcohol, rub that down, take them off. You can do some vinegar and water too. I usually do both. I do a vinegar wipe down and do that every maybe month and a half, you know, when you start to see it getting a lot of that calcium stuff, because it's actually a biofilm and bacteria lives in there. So it's more, I don't typically see mold in the shower head, but I do see this biofilm and bacteria, and then of course Legionella.
Got it.
Okay.
So some of the takeaways, I'm sure people are going to wonder, okay, I'm going to go into my house right now and start looking at all these areas. So some simple do-it-yourself kind of things right now. If nobody really has a problem, but they want to be proactive, like where should people be really concentrating on their maintenance of their home to kind of keep these major problems from happening?
Yeah. So first thing, relative humidity monitor. That's my number one. You've got to have them on each level of the home. Start to monitor your relative humidity. If you notice that you're going over 50% regularly, especially up 60, 65, you're going to have dust mites, you're going to have mold, you're going to have bugs. So you got to get some kind of dehumidification to bring that down. Okay. That's the first thing. Second thing, paint cans got to go. Those, are contributing to your VOCs. Don't be storing, whether it's paint cans, products, building materials, old drywall, what else do people put in there? Cement board. I've seen it all. Don't store building materials in the house. If they're done, they're done. If you want to have an outside storage facility that's heated and cooled, I'm fine with that, but get rid of all the paint cans. Thirdly, we didn't talk about it, but real quick, printers. When you work from home, because Fernanda said she works at home, printers actually produce a whole bunch of chemical compounds. They can produce silicate. There's silicate, and then oh God, I'm forgetting the other one. There's talc. So the printer cartridges actually can, when we pull air samples and we see people have home offices that are, have their printers going, some people have more than one, it shows up in your air sample. So make sure to put that away from you. Don't sit on top of make sure your printer's my office, my printer's far away from me. So don't sit on top of your printer and work from home. And what else can we do? Low fragrance, make sure to avoid fragrances. You don't need it, and if you're going to do a fragrance, 15 minutes a day, most people do that, and test your home once a year for something, and make sure you get an honest picture as to what's going on in the house. Don't go into a panic mode and just think everything's wrong, because it's not every house has everything wrong with it. So get a really good assessment as to what's going on. Make sure you don't have the big ones. Radon, it's the number one cause of lung cancer out in healthy individuals that don't smoke. So it's real important to test for radon. I don't joke around about that. It's an easy test. Go to Home Depot, go to Lowe's, pick up a canister test, do it yourself, and deal with that. And then, start doing volatile testing, your water testing once a year, and you should be good.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So to be honest, invulnerable, and you can, you can check on us later that we do this. We've got paint cans, building materials, and printer within arm's reach of us actually right now.
Yeah. See, kids, am I going to have to send you a test? I think I'm going to send you a test, and then we'll do a follow up and see how bad it is. I think.
Can you actually talk about that test? Because I'm really excited about that. Can you maybe give us a Cliff Notes version? I know we can go onto your site, but tell us about the test that you've come up with, please. I'm really am interested in bringing this to the listeners. So
the Examiner, which is the one that Dr. Pompa and the affiliate doctors, they're going to be carrying that. Yeah. I like that as an overall assessment for to find out how you're living, what you're doing. Are you cleaning properly, dusting properly? Do you have dust mites? Because believe it or not, even our friends, the doctors, have offenses, so we need to look at that. But when we're talking about VOCs, that's our predict test. That does all of the volatile organics that you're exposed to. Well, the 250 top ones, we look at what are your biggest offenders, and then we help you reduce those so that you can bring your volatile number down to a healthy level. I use the European standard a lot, and then the European standard as far as VOCs. But then what I do is if I have a sick client or someone who has autoimmune issues or disease states, then I try to go a little bit lower to try to, just decrease that number even more. So.
Okay. And that's something that somebody could go on to your site and purchase these things and kind of do the test at home and then send it back to you. Is that how it works?
Yeah, so we designed it so we send it to you. You do an air sample. Some of them take 3 hours and 20 minutes. Some of them take 25 minutes. It depends what we're testing for. We're at My Healthy Home. We do everything. So we do proteins, danders, pretty much the gamut. But there are tests that you can just order and do in your home. And we did that so people could test anywhere, because not everybody has an IAQ professional. Not everybody has an environmental consultant. So we're happy to do that for anybody who wants to do it. That's what it's designed for.
Perfect.
Yeah, and one thing that from all the solutions you're giving, we have a lot of listeners that are renters, and they are like, oh, there's not much I can do. So you just gave, so many solutions for even people that are renting. Because there are things that are under your control when you own a house, but there are things that are out of your control when you rent. or when you go out on a trip.
Sure.
You know, so thank you so much for all the simple solutions that you gave us that we can start doing today that will improve, you know, indoor air quality.
And also, if you are a renter, you know, nothing stops you from doing a mold test. And if you do have it, you can break your lease. I mean, I've done this over the years with many clients. You know, we get you out of a lease, or you go to the landlord and you say, look, you need to fix this problem. And some people, they just don't know they have an issue either. So once they're presented with it, and I think $400 is nothing to spend to do a mold test. I mean, do it and see, you know, if you're spending $2,000 a month for rent, you might as well do it and see what comes back. And then you have a leg to stand on as far as negotiating with your landlord. So.
And the $400 one, just to kind of clarify and understand, there's actually more than the mold in that test though, right?
Yes. So we do all your particulate level. Those are the things that increase disease states. And so we have a very detailed analysis as far as particulate. And then we do your dander counts, we do your pollen counts, we do your molds, your hydrophilic fungi, which are the molds that are associated with water damage, Stachybotrys, Chaetomium, Eulicladium. So we do a big assessment of molds as well. And then, so it's in dust mites and all that good stuff. So you'll know if you have a substantial problem in many areas by doing that test, which I like. For $400, I don't think you can beat it.
No,
Absolutely.
especially when it's so far beyond mold. That's what I wanted to really clarify, that it's way beyond just a mold test. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I can do any kind of testing I want. I do it in the examiner. I do it in my house. I do it every third year. So you don't have to do it crazy once you know you don't have a problem. But like Fernanda says, I did the test. I did the examiner in my back bedroom. I had an extra bedroom, and it came back like an 8 count. And I'm like looking around and I'm like, there's no mold here. And I'm like, and then it made me look deeper, and I saw a little water spot, Eric, like up in the corner. And I'm like, demo it. And they're like, no, that's like just a little water spot. It was like, it was like tiny. I'm like, demo the wall. Sure enough, they demoed it. The outside of the house looked perfect. The inside looked perfect. You could punch a hole right through the plywood. There was a leak we have a large vent on the side of the house up in the attic. It was be able to take the air conditioner in and out. So it was much, much larger than like a gable vent, but it was big. The corner was leaking, and it was leaking down into the plywood, mold, and rotted out the plywood completely. You could literally put your hand right through it. So I had to pull everything off, go to the outside, pull everything off, replace it. And it just showed me an 8 count in the bedroom. I mean, there was no mold visible, but it told me something was there. Something was going on. And then you have to go and investigate it, and you got to get smart about it and say, okay, what was the problem? Where was it? And I found it. So nobody's house is perfect. You know, my house isn't perfect either.
It is funny because the day we remediated our house, we came back, Eric tested the house. It was like perfect, like level 1, I think. It was like perfect, done. We moved back in. The very next day, Eric looks in the ceiling. He goes like, there is a little watermark, a yellow watermark on the ceiling. Very next day. So because we addressed it immediately, it didn't have time to develop into a mold, but he had this infrared camera that you can see.
Thermal imagery. See through the wall. Oh, it was huge. It was like a waterfall. And the crazy thing is all of the remediation we had done was basically at waist level and below, really easy to get to. This was 15 feet and actually 20 in the highest because it was on the open vaulted part of our downstairs. I was like the worst possible place. Yeah, I just wanted to cry.
Oh, and let's talk to people about go up in your attic. If you have an attic space, you need to be going up there once every, let's say, Eric, like 3 months. When it's really raining, downpour, you pick the worst day, go up, look at all of your vents that go up through the roof, look at your roof, make sure you don't have any seepage coming in, flashing is okay. Make sure you don't have any water coming through your chimney. Chimneys have to be sealed. So, sometimes fireplaces, if you don't seal the brick, you're going to get water seepage. I've had it happen in my own home where the chimney, I had to seal it. The water was following a beam down. So you got to check your attic, do it in the worst time. Go up there, make sure you don't have any leaks. Because remember, that's your protector on your building envelope. So you want to make sure that is secure before anything. So always check your roof. Go up I say 3 months, and take a look at what's going on when you have bad weather.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Great tip. And then one of the things that we've realized, and they're becoming more popular and there's better versions of these, is to actually have the proper ventilation in your attic throughout the year too, because if you don't have any air movement, as you know, that lack of air movement is another great environment for mold to grow.
And tell people, like, so that would include a ridge vent. It might include vents, because people don't know, right? A ridge vent goes across the top of your roof. Like, so if your roof meets like this, a ridge vent allows air to escape and airflow to recirculate. Then you have your side, your gable vents. So, because people don't know, they don't know what a roof is supposed to look like, or if it, so those are important.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like here, for example, the building standards were so subpar when it came to that a lot of people, like our house, we didn't even have any ventilation. I mean, it was like almost non-existent. We did put in another gable vent. We put in, there's these vents, the O'Hagans, which are really low profile. And I mean, we had to add like 8 or 10 of those just to get the amount of air.
Where did you put your vents in? So when you had to go to repeat it, so did you put them on the sides? Did you go across the top? How did you install them?
Yeah, so it didn't make sense for us to do a ridge vent because of the way the roof was. So they're in kind of strategic locations, but we're mechanically ventilating. So we have a gable fan that is on a temperature dial, so it can come on with the temperature, but I also have it on a switch because sometimes I don't really want that running, like for example in the winter time. I really don't want it running, and so the natural ventilation takes over. But yes, summer's here, and with the lack of ventilation, it's unbelievable. I mean, we're getting like 130 degrees in our attics.
Attic fans are really important. You want to make sure like your that the electric's working, the fan hasn't blown out. That happens all the time, and people don't even realize their fan has gone out.
Yeah.
So it's real important. If you have an attic fan, you have to go up in this attic and check your space. I had a client, it was funny, I did a show and we were talking about, somebody had a client who hadn't gone up in their attic in like 30 years, and the whole ceiling collapsed in because they had like they had no ventilation up there, and the mold grew and grew and grew, and no one knew to go up there. So it's just crazy, like stuff that can happen. Like, oh
Another tip is you need to educate the other people that live in the building how the system works. Because Eric, like we have so many systems installed in here that I don't even want to touch it. Eric has to tell me, go to the third thing, click on here, click on that, because we're not using Wi-Fi equipment. So one of the days I didn't know any better. And, I think we should have an instructional material that goes with the house. And I'm leaving. I didn't know. I sealed the whole house. As soon as I tried to close the front door, I felt that pressure. Like I couldn't really close it. So I really pulled the door so hard. And then when I went to where the fireplace was, I just looked at on the room, and I just saw all this dust, all the particles in the air. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so weird.
You are so airtight, right? That you stay sucked out.
Well, the whole house fan was running on medium or high. And we have a very large whole house fan, which for people that don't know, it's sucking outside air, which you need doors and windows open to come through up to the attic and ejects it outside. But yeah, it was running on a pretty high speed. That's why she couldn't close the door. It was like,
oh my God.
Yeah,
my whole downstairs was black. Like, looks like we had a fire going on outside. Oh
yeah.
So,
we got all kinds of stories like that.
Yeah.
It's
so having instructions is a good thing
to
do as well.
Yeah. And then there's a lot of things that you can automate. That's not really one of them, because you'd have to automate the doors and windows too. But a lot of these things that we're talking about, like you mentioned, the ERV or HRV, dehumidifiers, a lot of that stuff, you can kind of set it and forget it. With a company like ours, or, I'm sure you've seen all these people that you can do that to where it's a lot more customer friendly.
Yeah. But it's true. The more we add, it's more things we have to keep up on too. It's like you add one thing and we're getting so intricate with everything from the nest to, our lighting to, it's crazy. So I have to say I'm a simple gal. So I like to keep things very, very simple. I'm still that traditionalist,
Yeah.
But what's interesting too is, all these thoughts come as we're going through this whole journey. And it's like, first of all, humans were not really designed to live in a box as long as we are and totally sealed up. And so these problems have come up because of these environments that we've created. And then we think we can buy something to fix the problem, when in fact, like you just said, it's really like, how can we get back to basics and how we've survived for tens of thousands of years as a species?
Yeah. And when you look at the old building construction, like my office, I mean, you can't see it here, but it's, original 1800s part of the house. The original other parts are like 1950s, and it's got the steam heat and the radiators, and there's just nothing like that. I mean,
Wow.
it really, when you have that old, real simple, I mean, it's not simple, but it's just sturdy, good stuff. You don't have to worry about forced hot air, cleaning ducts, getting dust all over, making sure you're changing your filter. But now with the steam heat, I mean, you can't even find good, it's harder to find someone who can work on a boiler anymore, that, they know how to put in the systems. And so, we've lost a lot of trade. It's important to get back to the trades. We need a lot of tradesmen. Unfortunately, we've lost a lot of that, and we need it.
Or you can move to Brazil, like where she's from, where all these problems don't even exist.
I was going to say that. Like, I grew up with open doors, tiles, brick,
I love it.
concrete. Yeah. We had an assistant that was cleaning the house every single day, hosing down. He went there. He's like, why is she bringing the hose upstairs?
Yeah.
She's going to wash the bathroom. What do you mean?
Like, cleanliness is next to godliness, Eric. That's it. I mean,
well, the building materials, it's stone. There's no wood. There's no drywall. Right. Yeah. It's amazing. And it's beautiful. And there's fresh air all day coming in. Oh, yeah.
Then I come here, and that's where I became, like
sick.
Enclosed. And I think that's like, they are all born in this environment. So there was not a shock. For me, it was a shock.
Yeah. Well, your body was like, what are you doing to me? You had me in this great place, and now I'm here. But I have to say, I think in general, I think the newer construction has caused a lot of these environmental problems. I do.
Yeah.
I mean, when I see people who have a lot of disease states, like whether you believe in them or not, I think a lot of it is related to our building construction more than people understand. And when I've seen 30,000 houses and I see people who live in the same type of building construction having health issues, it's cause for concern. And I'd like to see some type of implementation. We need a governing body over the building industry to kind of dictate, hey, these products are okay to use, they're not. We have nothing like that. No. And if they want to use something in a house, they can use whatever they want. And people think that it's safe. And just because it's manufactured does not mean it's safe. Look at asbestos. Asbestos took years and years and years to trace, and it's still here, prevalent in society, being used. And unfortunately, it took a long time to correlate that back, and a lot of people died. My grandfather had mesothelioma. I think that's why I'm a big advocate of building construction. I mean, he worked at the factory. He developed cancer related to asbestos. And so I think these companies aren't going to look out for us, unfortunately. And they're looking out for bottom line. And, I don't think people do it intentionally. It's just the way that society works. And so we have to be the ones to say, look, it's not good to use this product. You should use something healthier, or, form a group that basically looks at all these products and analyzes them and says, like environmental working group sort of does with all their personal care products, right? We need a building group where we kind of look at all the products and rate them in a scale and say this is good or not. I think that'd be great.
So when are we starting that?
I'm in. Let's go. I'm in, guys. Eric, I love it.
No, seriously, it's needed. It might be that's real. And I could think of the whole team right now that we've been talking to over the last few weeks.
Wouldn't it be great? Yeah, we need to do it. I mean, we just need like where we're ranking these products and saying, okay, here's flooring systems. These are the ones we give an A+ rating to. EWG does it all the time. So with their, personal care products, shampoos, all that stuff. So we need it.
Totally. Totally.
Gosh,
oh my gosh.
Thank you so much. We could literally talk to you for hours. So
yeah, you guys are so great. I love both of you. You're wonderful.
Thank you.
You too. Yeah, when we saw the video with you and Dr. Pablo, I can't wait to talk to her because I knew what would happen. So
thanks,
thank you so much.
Thank you.
You guys are so great too. I love it. I mean, we could talk forever, but anything you need, or if you want to put together something, I mean, I'd love to. And this is just, I think, the tip of the iceberg. I think you guys are just going to keep going with this, and it's just fantastic. So yay.
And for you listeners, you can make a difference too. Because the more of us that, if we hold those companies' standards higher, they have to change. Right. There are companies making changes because they are listening to us. So it's all about us. It's all about our needs. And the more we ask for better products, the more they're going to become available, and they're going to become more affordable than they was, if there was no demand.
Absolutely.
So And Caroline also has an amazing gift for you. It's called the Happy Healthy Home. It's a downloadable that you can go on her website, and her website is a wealth of information. So don't just stop at the gift, take a tour in there and read all the articles. So I'm going to have a link down below this video, and you're going to be able to download her product and her page. And I hope you guys enjoyed, and thank you so much, Caroline.
Yes.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Best of luck.